Hey guys, Shane here. So I thought I'd do a bit of a video tutorial on how I use oils for weathering my armour models. So in this video we're going to be covering dot filters and pin washes. I have everything I'm going to be using laid out. Obviously I got our subject, which is the Firefly I've been working on. So we'll start with the model first. So the model has been coated, as you can tell by its reflectiveness, in several coats of Vallejo gloss varnish. So before we start working with oils, it's very important to seal in our paint finish with preferably a gloss varnish. Some people use satin. Personally, I prefer gloss. I find satin sometimes doesn't achieve the same capillary action that a gloss finish often does. So I've applied about 2 coats, especially to protect the decals, and allow this to dry overnight. So I have a small piece of cardboard and 2 old brushes. So I'm going to be using the card to place our oils onto, which will soak up any of the excess oils that have accumulated inside the tubes. Naturally, we're going to need a solvent of some description, and for this I'm using Winsor and Newton Artist White Spirit. Even though it's a bit expensive for such a small bottle, these do last quite a long time. There are obviously like AK or Wilder kind of spirits and tinners you could use as well, or turpentine. And then the actual oil paints themselves. So in this case, the oil paints I'm using are nothing particularly fancy. These are, I believe, Rooney, I think, or these are Rooney Graduate Series. Got these on sale. They're about €20 for about 7 of 12, which is very, very good. The Winsor and Newtons are probably a bit better, yet they're a bit more expensive. However, a tube like this will last you, and could last you well into many couple of years actually, in fact. So there's very good economy of money. So the colours I'm going to be using are going to be titanium white, sap green, burnt umber, burnt sienna, and yellow ochre. Now, the colours you can use are really up to you, but these are the ones I use. And out of this selection of colours, it's really the titanium white, the sap green, and the orange or the yellow ochre are the main colours I tend to use. As the others, especially the burnt sienna and burnt umber, create a very heavily weathered and rusted appearance. So if you're going for a very run-down vehicle, or you want to over-exaggerate your weathering, these darker colours and these slightly more warmer rusty colours are the way to go. However, we'll see this in operation. Obviously I have 2 brushes, so I have a flat bristled brush for applying our coats of white spirit over the model, and an old relatively fine tip brush for actually applying the oils. You can also use a toothpick or fashion a pick of some description out of a matchstick, or an old piece of dowel if you wish. There's, whatever suits you. So first things first, we'll start preparing the model and the oils for a dot filter. So first, it's a good idea to prepare our oils. Before we actually begin to decant our oils, I would recommend needling the tubes like this. And what this actually does is it begins to mix the pigment and oil together, especially if they've been sitting around for long periods of time. If you don't do this, sometimes what you'll find is you unscrew it and you just get basically a load of oil across your palette with no pigment. So I have a small sheet of cardboard here, which is going to be our palette. And again, because the cardboard has a absorbent quality to it, or a porous quality to it, it will also help absorb a lot of the excess oils. Some people will leave this overnight. I personally think as long as you've annealed these well, you should be okay. And it's also just handy to have a disposable palette. So we begin to decant our paints, or oil should I say. So a bit of burnt umber, our titanium white. And you don't need too much. If anything, this actually could well be too much. Burnt sienna. And probably my favourite colour of the lot of them, yellow ochre, because it's brilliant for olive drab vehicles. So you can immediately notice if we'll notice the Sap Green, how we can see how the excess oils are being immediately absorbed into our palette. So we'll do that for a few minutes, and now we'll move on to the model itself and start preparing that for the dot filter. So with our oils on their palette and ready to go. Now I actually started a bit of this and didn't realize the camera wasn't rolling, however, not to worry. So we can just do from this section. So taking a small amount of white spirit and decanting it into a steel or metal container. This is basically the small little cups that tea lights, when the small little like kind of dinner candles come in. I've taken the candle out obviously, and I'm just using the cup as a small reservoir for my white spirit. Do not use plastic. The solvent nature of white spirit or terpenoid and all them will eat right through that shit, and you will hate your life, and that is not fun. So I'm going to take our white bristle brush. That's why we have two of them, so we don't have to contaminate anything. However, you can use the same brush if you want to, just clean it in between goes. And just going to moisten the brush with a small amount of white spirit. I'm just going to, oh, that's way too much. So I'm just going to clean off my brush and spread this along the vertical elements of the tank, basically the tank sides and glacis plate and rear deck. And it's best to do this in sections, just easier to work. I've taken a small little piece of matchstick and I've sharpened a dull blunt edge to it, and this is going to be our little pick to apply. So I'm going to take some titanium white first. You can do this any colour sequence you want, it's up to yourselves. I'm just going to go for titanium white because it's whatever, just one first. And I'm just going to start applying dots of titanium white randomly to the horizontal sides. You can kind of see the dots of colour. Now I'm going to switch colour. I'm going to apply some Sap Green. Again, just putting dots randomly on the side. I'm leaving a little bit of space, a few mil between colours. I don't want them to get too jumbled up. I'm not going to apply any Brunt Sienna or Brunt Umber. I think that would be it would create too much of a rusty look, and that's not really what I want to go for with the aesthetic of this machine. And again, some yellow ochre, which is the colour I like the most for vehicles that are monotone, especially olive drab or bronze oxide style colours. And there you have a few colours laid out. So it might look a bit of a dog's dinner right now, but fear not. So now we're going to take our flat bristle brush, once again moistening it. There's too much white spirit here, so I'm actually going to use the card palette here and just take the excess off. And now in very gentle motions, and I'm only going to pull the brush in one direction, which is I'm just going to go straight down in nice smooth fluid motions. So we're just going to pick the edge and we're going to start working our way back, and as you can see, so just start pulling it back. So as you can see, the effect is incredibly stark right now, but don't worry, you have not ruined your model, not yet. Now I'm going to do is clean my brush again and apply, once again moistening it in white spirit, and I'm going to go again. And I'm just going to once again in the exact same way just gently pull in a single direction. And you can take your time with this because oils are a very slow setting medium. If you feel the colours are getting too blended or getting too strong, clean your brush off and start again, as in start the blending motion again, should I say. So like this front section actually has already got its dot wash. You can just barely make out the dot filter, these very faint streaks, and Once we give a couple of passes, about 3 or 4 passes of just working it into the tank, cleaning our brush in between goes, we'll slowly see it begin to fade and only leave the gentlest of residue in its wake. Like so. You can actually immediately begin to see now how much it's toned itself right down. Yes, there is a bit of a build up along the mounting plate for the side skirts. That is fine, and the same, you have some dots up on the top of the machine. Once again, that's fine. We can come back once the oils have taken a little bit more and clean that away with a brush moistened in the thinners that we've been using. Now be careful not to overwork it, so you can leave this alone for a few minutes and reactivate it once again with the solvents you're using. Also, naturally, since it is a solvent, you want to make sure you do have a bit of a ventilated room, because the stuff can get quite strong, especially if you're using turpentine. So it can be quite dangerous. So just a bit of a health warning there, lads and ladies, of course. And we'll apply the same idea now to the glazes plate, and just do it in sections. Again, moistening the surface, which is a very important step that we do this. If we don't moisten the surface, we don't get really nice streaks. Basically, the oil wants to adhere to immediately where it's stuck, and then you have to wipe it all off, and you have to start from scratch, and it'd be quite annoying. What I kind of find using the toothpick method is you tend to have far more control over the amount of oil you put onto the tank or on whatever subject you're working on. I often find with a paintbrush sometimes you can end up applying too much and it can get kind of messy, which is always to be avoided if at all possible, just for convenience sake. So once again, we've applied our dots, and exactly the same as we did on the side of the hull. Once again, I'm moistening my brush. Don't want too much on the brush because I'll just end up washing everything away, and I'll just turn the filter into a wash, which we do not want. And even though this is a much wider angle, you guys might not see as well, however you might see the motion better. So I'm just going to start pulling in a single direction. Like so. A bit too much on the brush, but fine, it's fine. So once again, clean the brush off, coming back again to blend this all back down. You can kind of see that I tend to go at a slightly faster pace when I'm just doing it myself. And once again, you can almost see the effect almost immediately. Now again, the gloss is making it a bit difficult for you guys to see. Unfortunately, there's nothing I can do about that. It's just what this method requires. And there we have our lower transmission plate done. Again, I have a little build up here and there, so I'm just going to wipe that away. Now we're going to return to the side that we began with earlier, because it's still being slightly too prominent. Basically, we can see the effect too much. So once again, I've cleaned off my brush, and I'm just going to reactivate it again with my moistened flat tip brush, and I'm just going to work that back in. Again, subtlety is your friend, and there you go. It's also being toned way back, but you can still kind of see the slight different color values, which is exactly what we want. I would not recommend it. I have done this in the past, so I know what I'm talking about. I would not recommend using industrial grade like painters, art, like interior like design and painters white spirit. It's just too heavy. It will lift everything off the model. It's happened to me a few times in the past when I was experimenting with it, because I was trying to find a cheaper alternative than spending almost €6 on like a 50, what is it, on a 75ml bottle of white spirit. However, they do last you for a couple of months at a time, because you shouldn't be using too much of this. So once again, preparing our surface by moistening it. take our little pick, and once again, I'm going to start adding dots. I'm going to do this on basically all of the upper, or all the vertical surfaces, like the upper glazes plate, which is going to be a little bit more trickier because of all the stowage on it, but still, we can still pick out elements to work it in, and it's going to be done in exactly the same way. So I'm going to continue working on this, and I'll catch you on the next part when we begin to work on the pin filters and use a bit of oil to tone down some stuff on the upper hull.